Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine Bennis podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 4, Episode 22, The Pilot. Hello everyone, welcome to Part 2 of The Pilot. I am excited to wrap it up, not only this episode, but the season. We are wrapping, I always say we, it's me. I'm wrapping up Season 4. And I'm patting myself on the back here and no shame about it. I'm really just kind of proud of myself for lasting this long. I'm laughing because I get the joke, and the joke being that I didn't have the best track record of sticking with projects or things that are challenging, and producing this podcast is a challenge every week. And, it certainly gets easier as time goes on and I'm doing more episodes. But getting started on this podcast took a while because I just convinced myself it would be too hard and I wouldn't be able to do it. And all this bullshit I've told myself my whole life. So let this be a lesson to any of you out there who think that there's something that you've been putting off because you think, I can't do it. You can do it. And define the success as you did it and you attempted it. And I guarantee you it will be worthwhile regardless of the result. So so that's what this podcast feels like for me. I feel very proud of myself. See, I can't even say it without the reason I paused there was to sort of minimize it, figure out words how to minimize it. And I'm not going to do that because that's bullshit. So I am proud of myself and I am proud to be proud. Sorry, not sorry. Haters gonna hate. Whatever else. I'm listening to the new Lizzo record and she tells me I'm special. And so I believe it. Okay. And you should too. Seeing is how I am wrapping up Season 4. I have also made another Elaine favorite moments video. I made a couple before this. I covered Season 1 and 2 in a video and Season 3 in a separate video. And so I just posted this morning Season 4, favorite Elaine moments from Season 4. And it is an admittedly rudimentary montage of me, yours truly, doing my own interpretation of these moments. I by no means fancy myself an impressionist, and I hope people don't think that I think I'm doing a spot-on impression of JLD, because I know I'm not, but it's just fun. It's just for fun. And so you can find those videos at the Hot and Heavy TikTok and the Hot and Heavy Instagram. You can find Hot and Heavy on Instagram at Hot Heavy Elaine. That's Hot Heavy Elaine. And on TikTok, you can find Hot and Heavy at Hot and Heavy Elaine. It's Hot A-N-D Heavy Elaine. So check out that video and the other videos. I hope you guys enjoy it. It's just to get a little chuckle, and I certainly enjoy making them and making my hair big and trying to find ways to resemble Elaine. The dress I'm wearing in this latest video I got from Target. And honestly, I was glad to find a dress that was very Elaine-ish, but also kind of horrified that, these are like Little House on the Prairie dresses, and I don't really understand why this style is coming back. But anyway, I found the dress at Target, and not to bash Target, I love Target, but I was both glad for my podcast reasons, but also horrified that this dress existed. So with that, I am going to start. Like I said, this is part 2 of covering the pilot. The synopsis for part 2 is as follows. Elaine's rejection of Russell causes him to resign and join Greenpeace with fatal consequences. Elaine applies for work at Monk's to investigate possible sexual discrimination, then learns that the large-breasted new employees are the owner's daughters. Russell's replacement cancels Jerry and George's NBC pilot after only 1 episode. Kramer gets medical help for his constipation problem. And again, this episode is written by Larry David. So what happened at the end of part 1 was when Elaine went to the Equal Opportunity Employment Agency and reported monks for hiring the big boobied waitresses. So I'm starting this episode where we are on the set of Jerry, the pilot, and Jerry and the cast are rehearsing a scene. The executives from NBC are looking on, they're in the audience, and Rita Kierson is not loving it. We met Rita before. She's very sort of cold, really not impressed with Jerry and George, and certainly not with the idea of the show. So right away, she's just like, talk about a show about nothing. George calls the scene to a halt to tell TV Kramer that he's not saying his line well. He should be emphasizing a different word. Well, of course, TV Kramer does not respond to this well. Jerry calls George over and says, I think you need to stop telling the actors how to say their lines. Look, I'm new at this, but I can gather that much. We go back to the executives in the audience, and Rita says, look, the real problem here is that Seinfeld can't act. And she's just cringing watching him. And Russell is sitting there as well with them, but he's basically catatonic. Rita asks him if he's okay, and he sort of wakes up from this little trance and says, I'm okay. And then he excuses himself. We then go to see Jerry and TV Elaine sitting next to each other. She starts doing sort of an improvised scene with him, asking if he's breaking up with her, and Jerry doesn't even know what she's talking about. Okay, fine. We'll break up. All right, we're broken up. And then she asks Jerry, can we still be friends? So she's clearly a method actress, so she's not abandoning the Elaine character even when the cameras aren't rolling. Then we see George confronting TV Kramer to ask if he took the raisins. He tells George to stay away from him and that he doesn't like him. Russell is on the phone, and he's on the phone with Elaine, and he's pleading with her. He's desperate. He can't go on like this. Will you please call me? Well, Elaine hangs up on him, and then a crew member accidentally bumps into Russell, and he flips out and fires the guy, has a complete meltdown on the set. Next, we're at Jerry's apartment. George is frustrated. He won't get his biopsy results for another couple days. He's still thinking about this discoloration on his lip. Jerry is freaking out also because he can't act. He's going to make a fool out of himself. This is going to ruin his career. Kramer enters very slowly. He's clearly uncomfortable. Now, just a reminder, Kramer can't dump. He's really constipated. The bran isn't working. Nothing is working. And then Jerry says it might be time for the dreaded apparatus. He's talking about an enema, which I believe is shooting water up your ass to get poop to come out. I'm a scientist. What can I say? So I think that's really what happens. Don't Google it. But anyway, Kramer doesn't want to do that. He says there will be no inserting in that area. Elaine enters. She's very excited. She filed a report against monks, and an investigation is underway. She really feels accomplished. And Jerry asks if she's going to be going to the taping. She says no, she really doesn't want to run into Russell. He won't quit. He's just obsessed. Kramer says he's not going either. He needs to stay home in case, he needs to dump. Quickly, my take, I don't blame Elaine here. Russell is so creepy. I don't blame her for not wanting to go. I wouldn't go either. I also don't love how Jerry really dismisses Elaine's concerns. Oh, he just has a little crush on you. But I do love that really sweet sentiment when he says, we need you there. He really wants her to come. It's sort of a rare glimpse into their love for each other. Platonic love, but love nonetheless. Next, we're at the pilot taping. Now, this is a lot of stuff going on. So we see shots of the audience filing in, all this other activity going on that's typical to a set. And then we actually see Elaine. She does come to the taping. She's in a blonde wig. She's in disguise in case she sees Russell. We do see a quick cut of Kramer purchasing an enema. So I guess he's changed his mind about inserting something. Back to the set, TV Elaine is demanding her hair be higher. It needs to be a wall of hair. Elaine gets recognized even though she's in that wig. I really like this moment. It's a friend from camp from 1978, and she hasn't changed a bit. I thought that was a little cheesy but cute. TV George is freaking out, having a very real George type panic before the taping, and it really amuses Jerry. You're just like George. Back to the studio audience, Rita asks where Russell is. Stu and Jay says he's unwell and they think it's over a woman. And Rita's response is, how pathetic. I love that. I love Rita. I think she is a very fun character. We see George. He's on the phone calling for his biopsy results. Well, he misunderstands what negative means, prognosis negative. But then whoever's on the phone explains, no, it's actually good. And then he's absolutely elated. We then see an eerie shot of Crazy Joe Davola in the audience, a little hint as to what might be coming later. George is at the craft service table. He's now in a great mood. I mean, double dipping his chip. I don't know if any of you noticed that. He does indeed double dip. He's got some swagger now that he's healthy. He doesn't have cancer. He sees TV Kramer glaring at him, and he tries to make amends. Let bygones be bygones. Goes on about how strange it would be to take the box of raisins, but you know what? One day we'll laugh about this. And then TV Kramer just ups the threat and says he's going to pull his heart out and shove it down his throat. Then we see the warm-up guy speaking to the audience and then introduces Jerry. He greets the audience and explains the show. And then we hear someone shout from the audience, "Sic semper tyrannis!" And we get a shot of Crazy Joe Davola leaping out. Next, we are at Jerry's apartment. Everyone is gathering at Jerry's place to watch the pilot. Jerry and George talk about how bizarre the Crazy Joe Davola incident was. Elaine enters, and this is exciting. See, this is exciting. And she told everyone she knows to watch. Jerry asks if she's heard from Russell. She says no. It's very strange. Apparently, Russell didn't even show up for the taping. Kramer enters. The enema clearly worked. He's dancing around. He's just in a great mood. They all congratulate him. He says it was wet and wild, which is gross and hilarious at the same time. Elaine moves over on the couch to make room for Kramer, but then she feels something underneath the cushion, and she finds a wallet. It turns out it's Jerry's father's wallet, the one he thought he'd lost. George shushes everyone because the show is starting. We see the opening credits, and it's very cheesy. Everything from the music to them cheersing at the end. It's really funny. And then we see this series of friends, family, past characters from the season watching the pilot from their own houses. I think this is so well done. I'll just go over who they feature. I'm not going to get into all their reactions because that'll take too long, but I think they did a really good job sort of covering everyone. So we see Susan and Allison, both George's ex-girlfriends, who are apparently a couple now. We see Sid Fields, who played the old man, and his housekeeper, who was rubbing George down with oil. Marla the Virgin makes an appearance with JFK Jr. Apparently they're still together. We see the Drake and the Drakette. Now they're watching on a very mini TV, like a little remote TV. It's really funny. We see Ping and his cousin Cheryl. We see the Bubble Boy and his parents. And man, the Bubble Boy now hates Jerry Seinfeld. He thinks he's a sellout, and then he tries to grab the remote, which is one of the things mentioned in that episode. It can be very frustrating. Then the show goes to commercial, and Elaine says she really loves the guy playing the butler. And Jerry says, he's John Ritter's cousin. And in real life, that actor was John Ritter's cousin, which is very exciting for me. I'm a huge John Ritter fan. I count him as an early comedic influence for me. And the other is Julie Louis-Dreyfus. So I love that he's mentioned in this episode. And I love that it is actually his cousin playing the butler. We get back to the show and then we see some more people from the season watching. Of course, we see Morty and Helen. Helen, of course, is so proud. How could anyone not like him? We see Calvin Klein with Tia. Oh, but he picks his nose. We see Sal Bass and Sidra from the health club. And then we end off that montage with Newman asleep watching a Yankees game. What a perfect way to end it. So the pilot ends and they're all so happy. They start cheering. Elaine says it's really funny. She's not just saying that because she knows them. It was really funny. And that, oh my God, this is going to be a huge success. And George, you're going to be rich. And they all are getting ready to go out to celebrate. But then the phone rings. It's Rita Kierson calling for Jerry. She mentions that Russell is no longer with NBC and no one knows where he is. But anyway, she's the new president now. And her first order of business is she's going to pass on the show. Oh my gosh, of course Jerry's devastated, but it just aired. Rita says, I was never really on board with this show. During this conversation, Elaine is sort of sneaking away. She knows what's coming. Jerry gets off the phone. George and Jerry just lay into her. It was her fault. Russell's obsession with her cost them everything, cost them the series. Elaine's like, what? I didn't know he'd fall for me and go insane. It's not my fault. And George says, yes, it is. You're very charming. Then we see Russell on a Greenpeace boat going on and on about Elaine to the other Greenpeace workers. And that's pretty much it. My take, it's such bullshit to blame Elaine. I mean, maybe Russell could have just been less pathetic, to use Rita Kierson's word. I don't love that they blame Elaine here, but I do understand that they need to take it out on someone. That moment where George yells, "You're very charming." It's very reminiscent of George yelling, "It's funny," to Jerry. He's yelling compliments in a very angry way. And that's very, very funny to me every time. All right, next we are at Monk's, the last scene of the episode. They all enter, and it's very crowded. There are a ton of dudes in there. Elaine is like, well, look at this. Nothing has changed. And then she sees those two men she talked to at the employment office, and she goes over to them and says, what the heck? You guys didn't do anything, and now you're eating here? And they're like, oh, no, we're just checking things out. Yeah, checking out the boobies. Elaine confronts the manager and she calls him out and says, all the waitresses are alike. Of course they're alike. They're my daughters. Okay. Elaine feels bad, feels like an idiot. They all get seated. Peggy helps him. Hi, Peggy. Then George has the realization that he has to look for a job the next day. He considers Greenpeace, which is basically a device to go back to the boat that Russell was on, and apparently he's dead now. He died on his Greenpeace mission. My take, I think it is just so funny that all the men from that office are at Monk's. Word has spread about Elaine's complaint, and I like her confrontation with those two guys at the booth. Now, the reveal about all the waitresses being the manager's daughters, it feels a bit hacky, a little too typical sitcom for me, but it still gives me a chuckle. They needed to wrap up that story, so whatever. But I guess I was just kind of pulling for Elaine to be justified in her concern and get some justice. But in the spirit of humiliation equity, I appreciate that sometimes she does get egg on her face. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break, and I will see you on the other side. When was the last time you were turned on at a restaurant? No, not by the food, but by the person bringing your food. If your answer is never, you're not alone. I mean, not everyone enjoys eating chicken wings served by ladies in tight t-shirts and short shorts. Introducing Nut Hugger Bistro, a charming place to eat, drink, and see the outline of your waiter's penis. That's right. We only hire well-endowed waiters who wear pants that leave very little to the imagination. Our James Beard award-winning chef will dazzle your taste buds with dishes like charred mackerel with sweet and sour beetroot, pork chops with fig and grape agrodolce, and a pear frangipane tart with hazelnuts. And nothing pairs better with such decadent flavors than being surrounded by huge dongs pressing against pants. Good food starts with good ingredients, so we are proud that Nut Hugger Bistro uses ingredients from our very own Nut Hugger organic farms all across the country. From raising cattle to growing the juiciest plums, you can rest assured that your meal will arrive at your table straight from the farm. And that the man setting your plate in front of you will have a big old bulge in his trousers. Finally, a place for those of us who enjoy gourmet food and big dick scenery. Nut Hugger Bistro. We never run out of sausage. And we're back. I'm going to dive right into Contributor Corner. Greg has some thoughts this week, and he says, I'm very confused by this Elaine and Russell relationship. It's very odd to me how he's so into her after one date, and that 2 months later after that, he hasn't taken the hint. Well, maybe I do. She's a perfect goddess. But this dynamic of him being so obsessive over her and her being so uninterested needed some more backstory, maybe on his history with women or something. He hadn't been in the last few episodes, so it was weird that this came back into the plotline of the pilot. I do think both JLD and Bob Balaban play the first scene well, though, only the second and last time we've seen them together. Bob Balaban always has that very dry, neurotic demeanor in every role, and when he pours his heart out, she just starts talking about the snack mix. On top of that, she just disses his whole industry in one swoop. The awkwardness of her leaving the restaurant is so cringy, but she had to do what she had to do. It's a very hilarious dynamic that may have been much better had it been written as more of a chunk of the Elaine storyline for the whole two-parter. It's like at the very beginning and the very end, but the middle of her story completely shifts to the waitress thing. Yeah, I agree, Greg. You know, I think there was a struggle to not have, especially after they sort of introduced that this pilot thing was going to be an ongoing project for Jerry and George for season 4. I remember reading that they were weary about it having to be in like every episode it being mentioned. So they were trying to kind of pepper it in every now and then. But I totally agree with you that the Russell and Elaine storyline could have used just some drips and drabs here and there, you know, like maybe even a conversation after the shoes episode, just like a follow-up. Hey, how was that date with Russell? And Elaine could have been like, you know, he only talks about his job and television, blah, blah, blah. You know, I don't know. There could have been a little bit more here and there that would have rounded out this storyline. Because I do agree with you, Greg. It's sort of not earned that Russell is this obsessed with Elaine. It feels like it does come out of nowhere. And you bring up a good point. I never really thought about that, how the Russell thing only is at the beginning and then at the end, and then the middle there's no Russell at all. So I do appreciate that she has a couple of storylines happening, but at the same time, we needed more. We needed more. If for nothing else, to see JLD and Bob Balaban play together more, because I think that would have been nothing short of great, because they're both fantastic actors. Next, Greg says, since most of the first half of this episode is about the casting of the pilot combined with George's panic about his lip, Elaine doesn't get too much here, besides some completely random side story about the waitresses. I almost wish they had her included in the meeting where they were at NBC doing the casting, specifically for the Elaine part. Much like we got to see how George reacted to the people who would be playing him, I would have liked to have seen Elaine do the same. Nice cameo by Mariska Hargitay, whom I adore on SVU. It's weird to see her young and sexy and not a hardened detective in a pantsuit. Yeah, she's very young and sexy in this episode. I think she's still sexy, but that's just me. Yeah, I mean, I'm so technical with this shit, so I'm sorry if this sounds like, this wouldn't happen, but it wouldn't happen. I'm sorry, but Elaine has no role in the pilot, meaning like she's not a writer, she's not a producer, so there's really no reason she'd be in the meeting. I do think it's a funny premise. Now, you just gave me the idea of maybe she could see some tapes. I think that could be really funny. That could have been a scene. Or once the actress gets cast, the woman Sandy who gets cast as Elaine, I think it would have been really funny to have Jerry and Elaine go to that restaurant to meet with her, because I think she would want to meet Elaine, while, you know, TV Kramer has zero interest in what real Kramer has to say. It seems like the actress Sandy would really want to meet Elaine and really want to know her, you know? So I think that could have been a really fun opportunity to have a scene there with Julia Louis-Dreyfus and the actress who plays Elaine. Greg goes on to say, my favorite part of the whole first half is actually Kramer. He cracks me up when he comes into the audition and he's just smiling at Jerry, and Jerry just lets him go ahead. It's a very small part that is overshadowed by the raisin theft and his subsequent bathroom issue, but just that little entrance of his, I love it. Oh my God, I do too. I didn't really want to spend too much time with it. I'm trying to be better about not getting off on like non-Elaine tangents, but I mean, the way he reads for Kramer is hilarious and so ridiculous. And yeah, that sort of like look he's giving to Jerry, and it's so well done. And then, he's constipated. So I guess they just wanted to give that to him. Greg's next thought: while I do like Elaine's story of applying for a job at Monk's to see if she measures up, I think it would have worked better in another episode. Maybe tie it in more with the guys, specifically George's input on the bosomy waitresses would have been a good back and forth versus being completely detached from what the other three are doing. It was so out of the blue that now this is what she's dealing with and not Russell. All in all, the episode feels very clunky to me. Everything is funny, but so much of it feels like chunks of bigger storylines they had planned for the season that they threw together to make a double episode. Since Elaine and Kramer weren't involved in making the pilot, I guess they just needed to fill their time with these side stories. But the timing of everything makes it seem as though the casting, the rehearsals, the taping, and then the airing of the pilot all happened within days. Has Kramer been constipated this whole time? Oh, that's a really funny thought. I thought that too. I was like, wow. I guess I've heard of things like that happening where it's like, it happened with Estelle Harris on this show where she was cast as Estelle. And I think she was later that same day she was at the table read. So I know sometimes casting happens sort of last minute, but yeah, I'm a little curious on the timeline too, because to produce the entire show, because in the beginning of this episode, it's as if they haven't heard anything happening for the pilot from NBC. And then, then they get the call, casting's happening. So it's like, okay, well, did they have the sets built? Did they have, I don't know. But yeah, I think the timeline is a little bit unrealistic. And yeah, I to your point, Greg, I think it would have felt too forced if they tried to have Elaine and Kramer somehow be involved in the pilot. Kramer is a little bit, Elaine is a little bit with, the auditioning and then also the Russell thing. But I think that they sort of needed their own thing to round out the entire episode. I'll get more into that in my final notes. But yeah, I agree with you. I think they could have kept Elaine's story as like the issue with Russell a little bit more prevalent. And then if they, in the spirit of not being so random with the bosomy waitresses, it could have been kind of a Elaine and Sandy, maybe weird relationship that was happening. Those were possibilities, but yeah, I think you're right. Maybe these were a bunch of random storylines that they were like, yeah, just shove it in here. We'll make it work. Moving on, Greg says, I love the bit where Elaine is in disguise and gets recognized from behind by someone she went to high school with. It was such a funny idea to have Elaine still want to be there while also hiding from creepy Russell. I loved that too. I thought that was so perfect. Yeah, I love it. From behind, he says, you haven't changed at all. She's got this short blonde bob. It's great. And lastly, Greg says, my favorite part of the second half is where they're all together watching the show air. Elaine is so happy for her pals. Her supportiveness in saying, it was really funny and I'm not just saying that because I know you. What a friend she is. And then how quickly they turn on her when they find out Russell is gone and the show is killed. I also love all the cameos from people from the season all watching the show. Very clever idea. Agreed with all of that, Greg, and it's a nice segue into my favorite Elaine moment for part 2. But real quick, if any of you out there, well, first, thank you, Greg, again, for sending in notes. And if any of you out there would like to become a contributor for Hot and Heavy, please email me at elainepodcast@gmail.com. That's elainepodcast@gmail.com. So my favorite Elaine moment for the second half, it's pretty much what Greg just said. It's not a comedic moment for Elaine, but I love her genuine excitement for Jerry and George. It's just so adorable. And yeah, I just love it. I think that's such a great touch. And then my final notes for the entire episode. I will admit, I've never been a huge fan of this entire pilot storyline, the making the Jerry show. But the culmination is done pretty well here in this season finale. It's really well written, really fun performances. I think they do a really good job kind of wrapping all of this up. And the fact that it's like killed at the end, I think is a really good move as well. And I love how they try and include all these little touchstones to the entire season. Even finding that wallet. Elaine finds that wallet that Jerry's father lost. Like, there's these little moments that kind of call back to the season as a whole, like George double dipping the chip. Then the obvious ones where we're seeing everyone who's kind of appeared in the season watching the Jerry show. And like Greg said, it's just a super clever idea, a great way to recap the entire season. And my next point, I guess this goes against a little bit of what Greg was saying, but not that I disagree with Greg, but just commenting on how the show is structured and how the final cut actually turned out. I think it is a good balance of these peripheral storylines. So George's lip thing, Elaine's boob concerns, Kramer's constipation. I think that actually balances it out well so that we get a break from the storyline, the A story about the pilot. And that's a really smart move, I think, because just as they were careful in the entire season not to keep, kind of hammering this pilot storyline, even in the episode, which is the season finale, and it's called the pilot, even within that, Larry David knew enough to say, hey, you know what, let's have some other stuff going on and not just this pilot stuff. Now, while Elaine gets a couple of storylines here that we've talked about, Russell and the boobs, there's just not enough comedy for me, unfortunately. I think there was some great opportunity to figure out some more substance with what she was doing with the large-breasted waitresses. And then my late-breaking idea with her and Sandy kind of maybe having a scene so Sandy can pick her brain about being Elaine. But you know what? There was so much to jam into this episode. So, I'll forgive the fact that maybe they weren't fleshed out enough, but I will not forgive not giving JLD some funnier moments. I wish she just had some more comedy to play with. But at least she didn't have an entire plot about not being able to shit. Not that JLD couldn't make that hilarious. We know she could. But that has Kramer written all over it. And I think that's all I can say about the pilot, part 2. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.